Hi everybody, it's Michaela Kurzman. As you guys know, unfortunately I won't be able to join you guys in class because I will be presenting at the conference in Belgrade, but I did, however, hope to educate you through this video on the topic of instructional questions and answers. This topic is a type of communication assessment. This method is used to encourage thinking and deepen learning. This involves listening to answers and interpreting them through the help of a rubric or internally held standards. So by internally held standards, I mean that as an educator, you can kind of use your internal teacher sixth sense to be able to tell whether or not a student is answering a question based on what they think you want to hear, or if they actually know the information and can answer questions about it. Key elements of this method include planning key questions in advance or instruction to ensure proper alignment with the target and with student capabilities. And by this I mean you want to know the age range and grade of the class that you're going to be asking questions to. So you're not going to want to go into a kindergarten class and ask about politics. You're going to want to prepare these questions in a way that these students will be able to answer. Another key method is ask questions first and then call on someone to respond. This keeps all students on their toes. Call on both volunteers and non-volunteers. So this method gives you the ability to not only have the same person answering over and over, but reach out to students who may not have answered otherwise. Another method is probe various kinds of reasoning and appropriate. And by this, I mean that there are specific words that you can use that can spark a student's ability to bring back information that they have learned. So using words such as explain, understand, describe, identify, give examples, match, recall. These are all words that you can use in a question to help students understand what you are asking for. So for example, if I said, list a group of fish that you learned about in the text, they are able to recall information and types of fish that they have learned about and can explain to you what they can recall based on what they've learned. There are also questions that can stem this. There are different categories for these questions. There are analyzing questions, compare and contrasting questions, synthesizing questions, classifying questions, infer and deducting questions, and evaluating questions. And I'm going to give you one example of each. So an analyzing question can include, what is the order in which blank happened? This gives students the ability to look at information and answer deeply what the information is saying. Compare and contrast questions. This kind of speaks for itself. It's when you take information and you compare and contrast it and look at the similarities between them. So an example question of compare and contrast is, how are blank and blank alike or different? A synthesizing question can include, what do you conclude from blank and blank, or how might you adapt or modify blank and blank? So this is kind of coming up with your own understanding of a topic and understanding how you could change it or what you would do. Classifying questions are more popular. For example, find an example of blank, or what is an example of? These can be used to definitely determine whether or not a student understands a specific topic, because if you ask for examples and they can't give them to you, then obviously they didn't read or they don't understand. Infer and deduct questions can include, predict what will happen next, or why did the author do this? This helps students dig deeper into a topic or a reading, and this question will definitely make them think a little harder. And evaluating questions can be, what is your opinion on blank? What evidence do you have to support this opinion? Or take a position on blank and justify or support, defend it. These are the kind of questions that we were given when we were asked to write papers in elementary school, when you take a strong stance on one thing, because you really dive in deep to that one side, and you're able to come up with your own reasoning for why you chose that, and therefore understanding more deeply. So some questioning strategies that you can use in the classroom include use of wait time, which means after you ask a question, not being scared of that silence that comes afterwards. That silence is powerful because it gives students the ability to speak up If you, just get nervous and immediately, start speaking again, you've taken that ability of kids to answer for themselves away. But by waiting, kids who might not have spoken up speak because you are waiting for somebody to respond. Another strategy is modeling the types of responses you want from students, because as an educator, we aren't only supposed to teach, but we're also supposed to be an example. And by our example, it'll be easier for students to answer in a way that we do, which is also what we expect. An example of a conversation that you could have is, for instance, a compare and contrast question that you could ask is, what's the difference between panda bears and koala bears? And by comparing and contrasting, you are asking students to pull information from both subjects and find similarities, which is difficult. So a conversation would probably go, a student would say, well, one lives in this part of the world and another, they live in this part of the world, but they eat similar things. And so that's an example of a conversation that you could have with a child and find out whether or not they really understand, the difference in the information that they were expected to understand. Other resources that I found was the University of Nebraska Officer of Graduate Studies teaching at UNL gave great strategies for both asking questions and answering student questions. So I thought this was neat because a lot of times we focus on students, but this article answered strategies for answering student questions. So examples of this included answer a question with a question, promote a discussion among students, and don't be afraid to admit when you don't know the answer. There are many more, and there are also strategies for asking questions, such as encouraging students to use their own reactions, feelings, perspectives, and values and life experiences as starting points for discussion. And I think both of these are very important because, one, each student is going to bring something to the table that's different from their peers, and this is important for everybody to acknowledge and be able to hear. And then the strategies for answering student questions is important because as teachers, we sometimes focus so much on the students that we forget that we can also improve. And so I thought this article was really neat that it brought that aspect into question asking. So that sums up what I have learned, and I hope that you guys also learned something from this presentation. Have a great rest of class.